Welcome to the WACO Experience, an American story.
We, the people.
With your host, D. Scott Smith.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Interviews with leaders in business, government, and nonprofit organizations.
Promote the general welfare.
Jobs, products and services, and infrastructure for strong communities.
Secure the blessings of liberty.
The WACO Experience is an American story, a story of communities across America. It is your story.
We launched the studio and we launched the Texas Music Cafe television show on public television. 6 months later, that same show was playing weekly in 94 million homes across the United States.
Today on the WACO Experience, an American story, it's part 2 of my conversation with Chris Ermoian, founder and executive producer at the Texas Music Cafe. We recorded this on location on the stage of the Texas Music Cafe, located at 3004 Franklin Boulevard here in Waco. This location is a return to the roots of this important piece of Waco culture and history. Founded in 1997, the Texas Music Cafe, or TCM, started in a building which has deep roots in Waco music, going back to 1961. TCM is not only a music venue. As a nonprofit, education is foundational. However, you'll learn from Chris the archive of music history for the past 30 years deserves and is in need of preservation. This edition of the WACO Experience, an American story, starts quite organically. I had a blast talking with Chris. I know you'll be fascinated to learn what was the first nationally syndicated show to come out of Waco. I'm your host, D. Scott Smith. Each week I bring you stories from leaders in business, government, and nonprofit organizations. You can learn more about this program, our sponsors, and the podcast version of this show by going to our website, thewacoexperience.com. This program is made possible by sponsors. Quality Cabinets. Your home is an extension of your personality. Smooth, clean, and elegant. Quality Cabinets is the perfect choice for the modern aesthetic. Visit the Design Center at 720 New Dallas Highway in Waco. Quality Cabinets are available for delivery when you are ready. Call 254-744-0938 and visit the website, qualitycabinetstx.com. PresentGifting.com. Imagine never forgetting an event for those important people in your lives. Because relationships are important and moments matter. Present Gifting is a free service to send you gentle reminders of birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, and more. Register today at PresentGifting.com. Heart of Texas TV Indoor Billboards. My friend J.B. James Battle, former helicopter pilot for the U.S. Army, and his team at Hot TV amplify your brand where it matters most. Be seen where your customers eat, work, shop, and play. Learn more on the web at hotdigitaltv.com. Military Creator Con, April 16th to 18th in Arlington. Military Creator Con is a movement that unites military-created visionaries across art, media, and entrepreneurship. A multi-day forum where service members, veterans, families, and supporters discover new tools, share expertise, and celebrate their collective creativity. Register now at militarycreatorcon.com and use code SCOTT10 to receive a discount. Christian Family Law Solutions is a Christian-based, solutions-focused mediation provider. They help their clients avoid costly litigation and remain focused on the most important priorities in their lives. Creating paths for peaceful resolution, not brokenness. Call 254-777-5171 or on the web, 1c6.law. One of the great things I love about doing this show is I don't have to talk much. The less I talk, the better the shows are.
I see. Well, I love that you've taken an interest in Waco. I really do. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're asking those questions, and I'm glad you're curious enough to seek them out.
Well, thank you.
Curiosity and a hunger for knowledge is the thing I admire most in people, especially in people older than myself. I had a crew member, David Summers, was a guy that worked on our crew for about 12 or 15 years. He was our oldest crew member. When he retired from here, he was 89, and he would keep up with everybody, and he was just hungry for knowledge, especially technology. He wanted to be on the front edge of all of it, and I just admire that so much.
Well, as you can tell, we're continuing our conversation with Chris Ermoian of Texas Music Cafe. D. Scott here, And we are on location at Franklin Avenue, Texas Music Cafe. And in the first episode last week, we talked about what the Texas Music Cafe is, how it's different from traditional venues where we really get to focus on the artists, on the music, connecting the artist with the audience. But it's not just about the artist. It's about everything that goes around it, all the technical parts, all the lighting, audio, everything that goes into creating music. Plus, this is a nonprofit, so education is a big part of that. But Chris, you were here in this building, I will say, before the beginning. So we want to get into all of this history of the Texas Music Cafe. So when people come down here and they experience the show and they take a little tour and they walk down the hallway and they see the recording studios, the offices, the different parts of the building here, they're going to be connected to it different than anyone else because we got into your brain.
It's a scary place, I'll tell you. When you enter Texas Music Cafe on Franklin Avenue, 3004 Franklin, you are as close to hallowed music ground as you can get in Waco, I think. As far as I know, the roots of this building go back to 1961 when this was the original home of Ray Hennig's Heart of Texas Music. It was their first location. Most people know Ray Hennig's Heart of Texas Music because they are an establishment in Austin, and they know them because they were the people that sold Stevie Ray Vaughan his #1 guitar. Most people know that about them. What they didn't know is that it began in Waco and that it began in this building. And ever since that time, music has happened in this space. Somebody told me the other day that they saw Eric Johnson, who is one of the top guitar players of all time, perform in this building when he was about 17 years old. I came here, I think the first time, I'm pretty sure, was 1977. My dad was a barbershop quartet singer, and I was invited to be on a recording session with Charlie Pack, who was a Fishin' Country guy. He had a TV show called Fishin' Country, and Charlie was a musician, and my dad brought me along on that. And me setting foot in the recording studio, which was already here, they had built that. Him and a guy named John Milam built the recording studio. And George Blackshear was another guy that helped wire the studio. They had a full-blown Hollywood-style professional recording studio in this building, and I got the privilege of setting foot in here in, I believe, 1977, the year we moved to Waco from Memphis, Tennessee. And I knew that this, being in that environment, it spoke to me. That I believe it was the silence and being able to hear my heartbeat in my ears and in my chest.
Yeah, if someone has not been into a sound-treated room, it's a very different experience. We live in these hard surfaces in sheetrocked rooms. And when you walk into a sound-treated room, it changes.
Yeah. It has a way of pulling at you and pulling out of you and pulling music out of people even. But I stepped foot in that space, and I don't know if I was an autistic child or what, but it just spoke to me. And I said, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And that is exactly what I did. So I'm thankful for that opportunity, and I remembered this space and how it spoke to me. There are spaces that are very important to me, and I have a list of them. But I studied audio technology at McLennan Community College. I went there on a vocal scholarship, and I came back to this place to rent this space. And I got with the landlord, and he said, no, there's no studio. And I said, no, you have a studio somewhere in here unless it's gone. And we went through 3 or 4 buildings, and the second we walked in, I went, this is it. And we walked to the back, and it had been abandoned for probably at least 10 years. And I ended up renting the space in 1997, and this is where we launched the studio, and we launched the Texas Music Cafe television show on public television. And 6 months later, that same show was playing weekly in 94 million homes across the United States.
That's unbelievable. And that's just a part of the deep history of the Texas Music Cafe.
That was, I love to quiz the audience. People think that Fixer Upper was the first nationally syndicated TV show. That is not correct. It was actually Texas Music Cafe, as far as I know. I did learn from Dick Gimble that his dad played on a television show with KWTX sometime in the 50s, and of course Charlie Pack had Fish and Country, but none of those were nationally syndicated. The first one to break the seal 25 years before Fixer Upper was Texas Music Cafe. So it's usually, it's always the arts that push the boundaries. And again, this goes back to our attempt to find a way over, under, around, or through that problem of airplay. And PBS was where I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau and whales swimming and Sesame Street. And it was a place for experimentation and a place for the arts. And I'm just thankful that they did give me the opportunity. And it was described by the PBS affiliate who suggested that we put the show out. They described it as raw and sweaty. and they said that's what was missing from Austin City Limits. We started when Austin City Limits was at the 25-year mark. And they had just begun charging for their program on public television, and ours came out as another free music program from Texas. 25 stations dropped them and picked us up. And, it took off like wildfire. And I actually got in a kind of a verbal tussle with Terry Lacona, the producer of Austin City Limits, when I met him the first time, who thought that we had somehow planned that. And I told him, no, I'm just dumb and lucky. And after he realized that I was dumb and lucky, which I'm sure didn't take long, he apologized and he said, well, I feel bad that I treated you that way. And I did tell my crew, hey, I just got dissed by Terry Lacona. What an honor to be dissed by him. I met him and Bill Arhos, but he asked how he could make that up to me. And I said, well, I've never been to your show. I'd love to see how you do what you do. So we got the grand tour and got to attend a show. But yeah, we are, in some ways, that is, it's the most similar thing on television to what we do, but at the same time, it's not. Once we hit go, we don't stop the artist. We never stop them in the middle of the show. We stay out of the way, and our goal is to get out of the way and let the music happen. You mentioned there is a very symbiotic thing that happens when we make a show, and it is, I say, it's a three-part equation. It involves audience, it involves crew, and it involves the performer on stage. And all three of those things have to be hitting on all cylinders. And when any one of those elements is missing, I feel it. You feel it. I think that everybody feels it. So it is a collective community that makes this show. It's not just us. The audience is aware they are part of the show. The crew is aware that they're on the line. And even though they're volunteers, people are amazed to see the level of dedication that each one of them puts in. These people bust their butts. These camera guys, I don't even know. It's like special yoga moves that they've developed to be able to get the shots. So again, it's an honor to be able to have, it's just, my goal in this was to create fertile soil where anybody with talents in that arena could exercise those talents.
And speaking of soil, 1997, you came into this building, rented it, after you've had to search and prove to the owner that there was a studio here. The condition of the building wasn't pristine.
Not at all. No, there were anthills that were knee-high in the building where ants had taken over, and leaky spots in the roof. And we did renovate the space, put a lot of time, money, and effort into it. And we stayed here for about 5 years through the first iteration of the show. We outgrew the building pretty quickly. And Dr. Wayman Spence of Spenco that invented the powder that goes in baby diapers that turns into goo.
Okay.
And we like to tease and say that every time a baby wets itself, he makes a nickel. And but he was a very wealthy man, and he built this beautiful art gallery and music venue on I-35. It's now Twisted Root Burger. But he came to one of our shows, he and his wife, and they were blown away by what these kids, had created with no budget, basically, and invited us to his house to be a part of what was happening there. And it was such a huge upgrade. I mean, so we did our 4th season out of the Texas Playhouse. We outgrew that space, which held 250 seats. We had amazing artists come and play, and we're selling it out. And then we were invited to move to a larger space, which was the Waco Hippodrome. And that at the time, held 900. I think we filled it with 750 people on a Thursday night in Waco in about 1999, which is pretty incredible to get anybody off their butts. I think in some ways, it was easier back then than it is now. It is a luxury. What we do, you can watch our show live on YouTube as it's happening in real time. But it's still better in person. It always is. And to see, because you don't see the camera people and you don't see all that stuff, which is part of the experience. Yeah, we do that whole thing live, and, people they don't go out as much, I think. We'd like to change that.
So you were at the other venue for a period of time, then you were downtown.
Yeah, well, you skipped about 18 places in between.
Okay.
So when we moved from Hippodrome shut down. There was a financial thing. I don't know what happened. This is in the late 90s, 1999 something. They ran out of money, or whoever funded it, and we were basically homeless. We ended up moving it mostly to Austin at the time. We did kind of went on the road. We took the show on the road. And we were the first people to ever be invited to videotape the Kerrville Folk Festival. We did several years there. Rod Kennedy, who started the festival, had attended one of our shows and said, "I've never seen video work done with such reverence for the artist." And he said, "If you can bring that reverence with you to Kerrville, you can come tape." So we recorded. That's where the Peter, Paul, and Mary that I mentioned earlier was recorded, around a campfire. So he gave us free reign. And then we ended up, like I said, in San Marcos. We went to the Mariscal Canyon. We did a 5-day raft trip with Christine Albert and Chris Gage. He used to be a performer on Hee Haw and all that, but they're Austin-based songwriters. We spent 5 days going up, floating the canyon with nowhere to plug in, and recorded music down the canyon. We went to Steamboat Springs. We also were invited to do Delbert McClinton's Blues Cruise, and went to the Bahamas, and we hosted a venue in the belly of the ship, and we had people like Bruce Chanel, which in the 50s, or actually 60s, probably early 60s, the Beatles were an opening act for him, and he was telling us about Delbert showing John Lennon how to play harmonica for the first time, and then about 4 months later, hearing Delbert's harmonica on the song Love Me Do, which was the Beatles' breakthrough hit. So it's been, Lyle Lovett was on there, got to hang out and meet Lyle Lovett and Paul Thorne and Ruthie Foster, and I mean, the list goes on and on, but it's been an adventure. It's brought myself and my crew members to all different places, literally mountaintops. At 12, my brother had just quit smoking cigarettes the day that we drove to Colorado, and got out of the car at 12,000 feet, and he looked like a goldfish out of water. We've been on some seriously high highs and some seriously low lows in the process. But yeah, we were kind of homeless for about 15 years. We just kind of went where people would have us, which there's nobody that turned us down that wouldn't say, "No, we don't want you to come make a TV show out of our place and give us publicity." No matter where it was airing, whether it was on ABC or PBS or now we're on YouTube as our main outlet, and we had 3 million viewers last year. So if you're trying to get publicity and we're willing to come in and do all the work, there's nobody that tells us no. So that's kind of nice.
And what led to the return to here, to the original location?
I got old. It just got too hard. I got old and fat. So it's like it's just not as easy to do in the travel and the time, and out of respect to my family and everything else. It's just and Waco's home. This has always been home base for us, which worked out great, being in the center of the state when we were traveling. I don't know. This has always been home, and We just got tired of doing it on the road. It's more work because you gather it all in pieces and then have to reassemble all the pieces. And when we do it here, we can switch it all live, and it's at the end of the night, it's basically done.
Well, it was B.B. King who said, we don't charge to play music. We charge to move the equipment.
Definitely. B.B. King's bass player lives down the road in Rosebud, by the way. And that is, I have an agenda, if I had time and money to do it, I have an agenda of people, really famous people in a 100-mile radius that are living legends that nobody has taken the time to speak to or collect their stories. And I have a list of people I really would love to get to, and it just boils down to time and money.
You know, it's fascinating to talk to these folks that have had that opportunity. I got a chance to talk to Reggie McBride, and he was the bass player for Stevie Wonder. Mm-hmm. And just an unbelievable story. When he was 13 years old, Aretha Franklin had found out about him because he's this prodigy bass player, wanted him to tour with her in Europe. His parents were like, yeah, you're 13 years old. You're not going to Europe. A fascinating conversation. And so we have that right here in Central Texas, in the heart of Texas, through the Texas Music Cafe. And remind everyone, Chris Ermoian. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Dead on. Spot on.
Executive producer here at Texas Music Cafe, texasmusiccafe.org. Fascinating history. As we're transitioning toward closing this conversation out, and we've got plenty of time, I want to talk about this archive that you have. And you mentioned you were looking at transitioning out of the current role that you have at Texas Music Cafe and really focusing in on this archive of material you have. Tell us about that and what your vision is, especially in light of this emphasis on education.
About 4 or 5 years ago, I was approached by a Smith Music Group out of Fort Worth. They do live at Billy Bob's. They distribute, they started as a record label and became a distribution hub for everybody's music. They approached me and said, do you really have all of these archives? And now I haven't even digitized all of it. It takes time and money. I'm hoping we need to write a grant for that so that it doesn't get lost, because I've digitized maybe 10 or 20%, maybe 10% of the total amount of stuff that we have. And the formats have changed so many times over the years. But just out of what I digitized, I said, well, let's sit down and dig through it. So I gave these guys at Smith Music Group a tour, and 8 hours later, we had barely scratched the surface, and they were blown away with how much work's been done and what's in there, and the quality of the recording. You know, the audio quality is what's kind of been our tenet the whole time. Having a degree in it probably helps, but also just dedicated people that are willing to, do what it takes to capture live sound, as you know, in an environment like the Kerrville Folk Festival. 5 days of dust and wind and dehydration and stuff is not an easy environment, but the quality of the stuff is phenomenal, always has been. And we went through all that, and they said, we would love to put out any and all of it that you want to put out. So they kind of gave me free rein, and what I did is I just reached back out to the musicians, even though we have the written permission to do it. I wouldn't put anything out 25 years later that they didn't listen to again. So I started reaching out to musicians out of that archive and said, hey, give this a listen and tell me what you think. And if you like it, we'll put it out. And I think everybody I've reached out to so far has said yes. So it's, and also there's the relationship there still. They have fond memories. Musicians don't remember the bar gig that they played 300 times and got paid $300 and went home, but they remembered the way they were treated at Texas Music Cafe as an artist, treated like an artist. They remember the experience of being on television, all of it. So when I approached them, they've all said, yeah, man, go for it. Let's put it out. So I started putting out recordings. I did 150 songs last year on top of everything else we're doing. I did 150 songs, and I'd love to do it full time, actually. There's a lot of gems in there that need to get out, that need to be shared. When we did a Willie Nelson concert, let's say I think we recorded Willie 5 times now. And we might have used 1 or 2 songs on a PBS TV show, and then the rest of it just sat there in the can. and it's never been heard. I have Willie and Lucas, his son, playing together at Willie's Picnic, and I don't know. I mean, Lucas was probably 14, so it may be the first recorded version of them. I don't know, probably not, but there's just a lot of really interesting stuff in there to go through. So I want to dive into all that. My record label is called Screamin' Armenian Records. So what I do, the artist makes a little bit off of it. I give a third of it, the money from the proceeds. A third of it goes to the artist. A third of it goes back into Texas Music Cafe to fund it so we can continue doing this. And then a third of it goes back to the record label for doing the administration and publicity and artwork and all the, artist negotiation and contracts and all that stuff. Part of it is looking backwards, not looking forward. I've turned over most of the production duties to a phenomenal crew. Some of them have been with me since the very beginning. Casey Pittman is our head of all technology, audio and video, and he started with us here out of this building at 17 years old. He's still doing it today, and now his son is 17 years old and is now working for us. So coming back to this location, seeing the kids of the people that worked on the show now working for us is absolutely a full circle moment, and a privilege, an honor, and a blessing to do. And while I'm still alive and still have my faculties to be able to remember what's in the archive and be able to put a place, a date, a time, a setting, and scenario around those things, because I remember all these details that no one would remember about the artist and their headspace at the time it was recorded and why they gave the performance that they gave. And I'd like to document all that. In the end, all of us are just a puff of smoke in time, and I don't put any more importance on what it is that we do or that TMC does or that I did as being anything that's important in that sense. But I think it's enjoyable, and I think that people in the future, when music was still being made by human beings that cared, I think that's going to never go out of style. I think it's going to be evergreen, and I think that people will enjoy it for years to come. I guess the best precursor or example to that would be Alan Lomax. When I was a child, I didn't want to be a fireman or a policeman when I grew up, or a superhero. I wanted to be Alan Lomax, and that just seemed like a cool thing to me. It's not about me. It's never been about me. It is about the artist and the music and how it connects to people. And this has just been my way, my opportunity to create a garden of fertile soil where all that stuff can happen. And I would love to see it continue when I'm done and gone. And I'm in the process now of handing off every aspect of Texas Music Cafe to the next generation so that I can dive into the archives, wrap that up nicely, and turn it over to the next set of folks that are doing it, whether that's volunteers or just people who care.
The WACO Experience, An American Story, is a production of D. Scott Smith Company, all rights reserved. Thank you for listening.